Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today on her first trip on The Bullet, Robyn Sandoval. Robyn is, of course, the primary person behind A Girl and a Gun and also a member of the DC Project. I believe you're the Texas State Director, right?
I had to pass the reins on for the Texas State Director, but I am still on the advisory board and oversee the Southwest region.
Okay, very cool. Um, Robyn, if for somebody who's been living under a rock for about the past 10 years, could you explain to everybody what a girl and a gun is? And I'm going to go ahead and get social media hooked up here.
Yeah, A Girl and a Gun is the nation's largest women's organization of women who love firearms and women who love firearms training. So we have a cadre of instructors that host Girls Night Out at the range at more than 300 ranges across the country. The heartbeat of our organization is Girls Night Out, where women can come and learn about firearms, shoot with the girls, get that trigger time, and then we offer a lot of retreat and retreat style events, big training events, really big training events throughout the country throughout the year.
Very, very cool. I want to get started a little bit. Before we get started on the news, I want to tell everybody if you want to comment, any of your comments that go up on the Polite Society podcast feeds, either Facebook or YouTube, I get those almost immediately, and I can put those on the air and we'll discuss them live. If you're watching anywhere else, if you're watching on the OpsLens app or anywhere else that carries us, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet, and I'll get those up and get those on the air as well. Starting off news today, we got a little bit of good news, Robyn, out of a federal judge in New York. Reading this off WHEC.com, a federal judge halted key provisions of the Thursday of New York's latest attempt to restrict who can carry a handgun in public and where firearms can be brought, saying multiple parts of a law the state passed this year are unconstitutional. Skipping down a bit, the judge that ruled was Judge Sotheby, and he said, simply stated, instead of moving toward becoming a shall issue jurisdiction, New York State has further entrenched itself as a shall not issue jurisdiction, and by doing so it has further reduced a first-class constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense into a mere request. He continued, the state can't ban people from carrying guns in New York's subway system or the Times Square, though he said it did have a right to exclude guns from certain other locations, including schools. Sotheby is a George W. Bush appointee, and he did put his order on hold for 3 days to allow the state to challenge it to a higher court. And, of course, Letitia James, who's the Attorney General of New York, said she's going to do exactly that. So it is a win in New York. Your thoughts on this, Robyn?
Well, it's nice to see some common sense coming into New York. I mean, the whole point of this is to make it more accessible for people. The latest Supreme Court decision said that this was a law of the land. So it's nice that New York is going to be forced into compliance, even if we have to chip back at our rights a little by little.
And I honestly think that's going to be a lot of what we have to do going forward, is that it's going to be New York, New Jersey, California, Hawaii are going to write stupid laws. We're going to end up filing suit, and little by little by little, even though it was a big ruling in Bruin, we're still going to be getting our rights back in these problem states, little by little, judgment by judgment.
I agree. After the Bruin case, the laws that were written in New York basically were targeted to address exactly the things that Bruin said couldn't be addressed. And so we're going to have to win them each one by one instead of just overarching, unfortunately. But I do like how now we can carry in the subway system, in Times Square. These are places where people have to commute to work. They have to commute home. These are transitional spaces on the daily that people need their firearms for personal protection. So it's good to see that the places people go every day can be protected with their rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's be realistic. The more gun control laws they put up, the more it's it's designed so that the lower income people, the people who arguably need these protections the most, they make it the hardest for the lower income people to get because they have these long training periods they have to go through. They have high fees. They have a lot of hoops that a lot of people are just going to say it's just not worth it. I'm not going to do it.
Or they can't afford to. They can't afford to take that time off work. They can't afford to jump through all those hoops. And this is exactly the arguments I make when we're talking about that single mom who needs protection, and she needs it right now for her and her children, and she can't afford to take off time from work to go jump through all these arbitrary hoops, and she has the right to protect herself and her family.
Yeah, whoops, I'm moving things around, and I shouldn't do it while we were alive, so let me stop doing that. But and I'm going to try one more time to make that correction. That's not right. Let's try, because I've got a little bit of my green screen that's falling off the edge. There we go. Much better. I do have another story I want to talk about that comes out of New York. This one out of Buffalo News. New York's had a law for 10 years that you have to register your assault weapons, and I use the air quote for assault weapons, your AR-15s, AKs, that kind of thing. They estimate, and I'm just paraphrasing this entire article, they estimate that maybe 40% of people that had them when the law passed registered them, and of those, maybe 40%, it's a 5-year registration, maybe 40% re-registered them at the end of 5 years. And yet the state of New York is calling this law a success. I think it's just an example of we will not comply. You can make the laws, but we're not jumping through your hoops if we've already got the stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really ignorant for them to think that people have registered their firearms. Even the article itself says that this is believed to be a small fraction of the total number of weapons in the state. So even the Buffalo News is not ignorant to the fact that this registry is not a reliable source of information.
Yeah. I want to start to get to comments here. Ed Levine, who I had the pleasure of meeting at AmCon and GRPC this past weekend, Ed says VCDL and GOA just won a lawsuit in Winchester, Virginia. That didn't run across my newsfeed this morning. I will. Ed, I will do a search for that later today, or if you can send me a link. My email address is paul@politicsandguns.com. The and is spelled out, of course, all one word, politicsandguns.com. If you could send me a link, or I'll try to look it up here after we go off the air today. I'll make sure that on Legal Friday, when Alex Uli is here tomorrow, we talk about that. And Mike White, I want to get this comment in here too. He says, like I said before, it's a game of whack-a-mole. We win one, and they put another up. This will go on forever. You know, Mike, I want to go back to a story written by John Petrolino about 2 weeks ago now. He wrote that what is going on now with the Democratic Party is very similar to what's going on in the Democratic Party in the 1950s and the 1960s with segregation. They were on the wrong side in segregation. They're on the wrong side now. Yes, we're playing whack-a-mole. We were playing whack-a-mole with segregation in the 50s and 60s as well. Mike, take heart. We are going to win this. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of time, but we are going to win. What do you think, Robyn?
Well, I might be biased, but I think the secret to winning this argument is women's involvement. I think that the Moms Demand Group and the Bloomberg Group are focused on the family, and it takes moms like myself and other colleagues go into Congress and explaining that moms like us demand the right to protect our family. And I think that we're making big strides in moving that ball back down the field. And ultimately, you know, in stats that the NSSF has published, it says that 75, don't quote me on that exact number, but it was in the 70% of women believe that the right to carry a firearm is a fundamental right of self-protection. And if that many women believe in this right, I really think that women's ownership is going to continue to close the gap that men have always had been kind of the primary firearms owners in our country, but women are dramatically closing that gap. And as more women feel this is a fundamental right, I think we're going to see another 40 million women become gun owners, and these kinds of political tactics will not have as much weight in either party.
Yeah, and I've said for a very long time, the way we expand our rights as far as the ballot boxes to bring more people in, and I think you are instrumental, Robyn, in bringing more women into shooting. Let's face it, in families, it doesn't matter who becomes the shooter, the man or the woman. Usually, the other one tags along eventually. I would say it's going to be a lot faster if the woman becomes the shooter first for the guy to tag along than for occasionally there's more. If the guy becomes a shooter, the woman's more hesitant. That may just be my own bias showing, but
a decade ago, that seemed to be true with our member polling, is that most of the time a man encouraged a woman to become a gun owner, whether it was her father or a friend or an uncle or brother or son. But now the tides have really changed in the past 2 to 3 years. We've seen more women become the first gun owner of that family, and she's bringing the entire family and future generations into shooting, not only defensive shooting, but also recreational shooting. We're seeing the dawn of a lot more shotgun teams in high schools around the country, and that's really exciting for families to get involved. And I think it's really going to change the culture of gun ownership in the country.
Yeah, I would agree. The more people we get into shooting, and leaving the politics out of it to start with. When you take somebody to the range, and I encourage everybody, if you have the opportunity, take somebody new to the range. When you do it, leave politics totally out of it. Do not mention politics unless you're dragged into it kicking and screaming. But
the important thing is that we normalize firearms. That
yes.
Becoming a gun owner family is just another pastime that families do together. And the more we do that, the less we'll see of this constant infringing.
Absolutely. Next story I've got up in here in show notes. There's a story on Yahoo, excuse me. At least 12 armed citizens thwarted violent crimes in the past. Let me get I'm loading it now. Come on, Yahoo. You've always been a little slow. It's ridiculous. At least 12 armed citizens have thwarted crimes in just the last 60 days is the Yahoo headline. And Robyn, you're on with me on Polite Society podcast. We have a defensive gun use segment every week where we highlight 2 or 3 of them. I'm telling you, I could get 5 or 6 every day through a rudimentary web search of just regular people using guns to defend themselves. If they're going nationwide, they could only find 12 instances in 60 days. I think they were relying on just their personal knowledge.
That could be true. Isn't that kind of how Yahoo News works anyway?
Yeah.
But, the more stories we see like this on Yahoo and other mainstream stories, it does help give, not credibility because we know the facts, but it helps mainstream people see that there are more defensive gun uses because they don't believe they exist. So I love seeing them in these mainstream articles.
Yeah, and we are making headway there too. All right, let me get this comment up here. This one from Chris over on the Facebook side. Oh, we absolutely need to keep expanding the shooting community. I carry openly. I teach my kids to shoot. I've always been willing to teach anyone willing to learn. That brings, and I don't think you and I have ever talked about this. Robyn, I myself, when I first got into firearms, I've always been into politics. When I first got into firearm, I was a big open carry activist because I wanted people to see that normal, everyday people carry. I've now done a total 180 and I am concealed carry activist. I will fight for your right to open carry, but I don't think tactically it's the best move in the world. I believe I've never seen you openly carrying outside of training. What's your opinion on the whole open versus concealed carry?
I'm much in line with you. I will fight for your right to open carry, but I personally, from a tactical advantage, prefer concealment. For those who do carry, more power to you. I think that often retention or complacency can be a problem in those situations. I've seen people kind of become complacent with their everyday carry when they get too used to it in open carry situations. But again, if you're in condition orange and or yellow and you're looking around and you're a responsible armed citizen, then I will fight for your right to have the gun.
Yeah. I believe you should be able to open carry any handgun, rifle, shotgun, M1A main, battle tank, whatever you want to open carry. I believe that's your right. Sometimes I think there are smarter tactical choices you could make.
Yeah, I prefer to be someone who doesn't fit a stereotype, that it can catch someone off guard.
Next story I want to get to, an Ohio story. There was a gentleman who worked at an IHOP. He got into a argument, went outside waiting for his ride home, and apparently the person who he was in the argument with went and got a gun, came back, was shooting at him, hit him in the leg, and the guy who was outside waiting drew his illegally modified handgun and fired full auto at the person who was shooting him. Even though it was in defense, you cannot modify your firearms and not expect to go to jail if you get caught with it. And let me see if there's anything else in this story. It's not the best written story. This is off of Fox13Memphis.com. Memphis, of course, is no stranger to gang violence and shootouts. But they made it clear he used it in self-defense. Self-defense laws only go so far. Modifying your firearm to shoot full auto with this as a 3D printed part, it should be legal, but right now it's not, and you get caught with it, you will be going to jail. This guy, I guess, is getting 37 months.
And that's the thing. At the end of the day, we want to be able to go home to our families. Going to prison is not going home to our families. So there's an important line to think about. And that's not just true of modifying your firearm, but where you carry, how you carry. You have to comply with the laws of the state. The goal is to go home.
The goal is absolutely to go home and not to jail. Excuse me. I want to get one more comment up here. Actually, a couple more. Get this one up first. Simon says, Train, how does Rob Morse find 4 self-defense gun stories every week? He must have an amazing intelligence network at his fingertips. Well, both Rob and I cheat. We are a member of an email list that specifically looks for defensive gun uses every day. And also, I do for the bullet, I do a news search every day. And I'll find just in my own news search 2 or 3. And through that email list, I'll get at least 2 or 3. So that's how I come up with about 6 DGUs that make the news every day.
And also, Google Alerts is a good place to find them too. I'm set up for several different keywords on Google Alerts, and so every day you get an email with recent stories.
Yeah. Oh, I love Google Alerts. Let's see here, and then Mike, going back to the guy who fired back with semi-auto. Mike made a comment here on the YouTube side. At least he's alive. There is that. I mean, yeah, if you're in a case where you are being shot at, for all, yes, please return fire, but have a standard handgun when you do it.
And do some proper research on that. There's a lot of people who say, it's better to be judged by 12, but I think that really makes light of the situation when your whole life has changed. You're now in financial debt. Your family is dealing with the social, moral, ethical, legal ramifications of those decisions. if you lose your career that you've worked for, if you lose your livelihood, your family, is it really worth it in the end? That's a personal decision that people have to make, but also one that shouldn't be kind of said in a trite way. Really spend some time exploring that. Any good instructor will tell you that following the laws and making sure that you're doing things the right way is really always the preferred method.
And let's dig a little bit deeper in here. The guy got 37 months in prison, so 3 years and a month in prison. I'm guessing he got some time off for time served. But so he's going to be in prison for about the next 3 years. If he would have not modified his handgun and instead of just used a regular handgun to return fire, he probably wouldn't be looking at any jail time at all. 3 years away from your family, good luck on keeping that family together. Would I rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6? Yes, but I would rather not have to be judged by 12. And another one, a good one in here from Mike White again. He says, life will never be the same after a DGU.
If you've never read the book Violence of Mind by Varg Freeborn, I encourage you to read it. It talks about this exact situation and the aftermath of it so that you can go in as an armed citizen being fully aware of all the ramifications of your actions.
Yeah. One last story I want to talk about today, Robyn. This one off New York Post. I'm just going to read a little bit of the story to start with. The FBI statistics show violent crime dropped in the U.S. last year, but the data fails to account for thousands of places, including big cities like New York and Los Angeles. Experts say the data released as part of the FBI's Uniform Crime Report on Wednesday has some glaring holes due to an overwhelming lack of participation by police. Nearly 40% of all law enforcement agencies, including the nation's two largest cities, failed to submit any data to the feds, who reported that violent crimes ticked down by about 1% across the country. I think that maybe what's going on here, and this is pure speculation on my part, is if a jurisdiction, New York City, Los Angeles, Detroit, Chicago, is having a crime problem, they do not report by order of the highest political in that city. They don't report to the FBI to try to skew the statistics downward. They do not want to look bad. And I have to wonder if the Biden administration might be helping this out a little bit, because the Biden administration wants it to look like crime is going down. In the general country, it is, but in big cities, not so much.
I think we need to just look around and see how we feel in our cities. If you feel safe going to the mall, if you feel safe pumping gas, I don't think anyone has felt that way for the past couple of years. And just by our own personal experiences, we know that we're not living in a fairy tale land. And these stats aren't going to dissuade us one way or the other. We see it. We see it in our neighborhoods. We see it in our cities. And you're right. They don't want to report those stats because they don't want to discourage tourism. They don't want to discourage conventions that are just starting to come into certain cities to generate a ton of revenue and business development there, and the economic impact that those kinds of events have. They don't want those reputations. There's a whole lot more at play. It's a far more political statement than just this crime stats themselves.
Yeah. The book you mentioned, Violence of Mind, Pete over at Gun Website said in a comment with that link. If you're on the Facebook side, pop over to YouTube and hit that link for Amazon. That'll get you to that book. Yeah, and I both you and I do a lot of traveling. And when I went to Detroit to help out with Rick Ector's Women's Shooting Weekend earlier this year, I was kind of grateful that my vehicle has a pretty long range. I can go about 400 miles between Phillips. I stopped about 100 miles outside of Detroit, was able to go into Detroit, do all my driving around I had to do, and drive back out before I had to put fuel in it again. I did the same thing this past week going into Dallas for a gun rights policy conference. I stopped in Denton, about 50 miles north of the city, filled up the tank. I didn't have to fill up till nearly Oklahoma City on the way out. So that's just that's me. That's a trick for me. Unfortunately, there are people that live in Detroit, that live in Dallas, and they've got to put up with that on a daily basis.
Well, I wondered if you stopped in Denton, if you stopped at Buc-ee's. That's a good stop. So just because you need to get gas, let's call it out. You just wanted to stop at Buc-ee's.
Um,
But with that being said, though, you're absolutely right. Planning your stops, and I know that there are several women in law enforcement I know that train their young kids, their 15, 16-year-olds who are just learning to drive. They tell their daughters the middle line on the gas tank, that half tank marker is your version of empty. Do not let it get below, because you don't want to have to pull in at night. You don't want to be forced in a situation where you have to get gas in a place where you're uncomfortable. So I know that's a great tip for all women, to watch that gas gauge and keep it above half, just so that you have options. And that's just a safety issue. And again, these stats, and not just in our major cities, and we all know it can happen anywhere. So it's just a matter of us being aware of that.
yeah. And get a couple of we got a couple more comments coming in here. Chris says, can we get a YouTube link over here on Facebook? I grew up in Detroit, by the way. Bad place. I did just now pop a link for YouTube over onto the Facebook side. So if you want to follow that, Chris, it's there in the comments section over on Facebook. Robyn, we're coming down towards the bottom of the hour. These things do kind of tend to fly by. Anything going on with A Girl and a Gun that you want to promote that's coming up?
Well, we always have things going on. I just got back from our 3-gun match, but this week I'm hosting our Back the Women in Blue event, which is one of my favorite events of the year. We have a dozen officers, or 16 officers, flying in from around the country, female officers, and we'll be teaching pistol, rifle, and defensive tactics to those ladies. Hopefully give them some skills and some swag to take home and improve their lives and their communities there.
Very cool. Pete over at Gun Websites. Oh no, Buc-ee's is on the table. We're going to get Texas in here. I gotta say, I've been to Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's is okay. I spent 20 years of my life driving truck. Buc-ee's, all it is a large-scale truck stop with no place for trucks to park. It's all for autos, and it's nothing more than a glorified truck stop. Everything in a truck stop is made for you to get in, get what you need to get done, and get on the road where you can go back making money. Everything in Buc-ee's is made to get you in there and get you parting from your money. So,
well, that's true. The gummy wall is epic. You can get gummy sharks, gummy worms, gummy everything.
yes. I'm going to admit, it's kind of a cool place. I would not mind stopping again, but I am not going to plan to stop at Buc-ee's unless there's somebody with me who wants to go and maybe has never been there, or just is drooling for some gummies or some, what is that? They have gopher nuggets or something like that.
Beaver nuggets.
Beaver nuggets. There we go.
But they are safe, and they are, well lit, and it's a nice place to stop on the way.
They are that, and their bathrooms are very clean all the time. They take care of that very well. So, but we are out of time, Robyn. I want to thank you so much, and everybody. Robyn's filling in for Mike Piwowarski, and she's doing it on short notice. I sent her a message when Mike said he might not be able to make today. And I sent shotgun messages to a lot of people. Robyn responded, yeah, I'll do it today. So short notice, Robyn, again, thanks for coming along today.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of me. Always happy to talk about these important topics.
All right. I do recommend everybody do come back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Central Time. We're going to be having Alex Uli of the Uli Law Office in Indiana, his regular Friday legal bullet tomorrow. We're going to be talking about standing, which in legal terms means, can you sue, or do you maybe not have grounds to sue? And we're going to be talking about all the legal issues that have hit this week. Until 5 p.m. Central Time tomorrow, everybody, Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.